Now it's 7 o'clock, so if you can hear me, I'll give you a ringy-dingy. One ringy-dingy, two ringy-dingies.
That's me. No, that's not me. Yes, I can hear you, Field.
Okay, good. What do you want to talk about today?
This extraordinary story about the bullets that have no exit holes.
Okay.
And as you know, the British invented or developed or refined or perfected the dum-dum bullet in the late 19th century. And at the Hague Convention of 1899, I think 20 countries voted against it, and 2 countries, which I believe were the British and the South Africans, voted for it. The argument of the British was that when attacked by marauding and fanatical tribesmen, these guys, they reckon, could take up to 6 bullets, normal caliber bullets, and still come through and chop the head off of a British officer or a regular grunt. And so they decided they needed a method of imparting more kinetic energy. I did teach you kinetic energy, didn't I?
As I recall, it was the 8th of August of 2007. We were talking about, let's see now, we were talking about Barry Sotero's lack of parental DNA on the male side. We were talking about Mitt Romney's mantle pants and his 1968 automobile accident in France that involved a Citroen and a priest and a dead woman in the back seat. And also you had a little snippet in there about Bill Clinton's voodoo underwear. But go ahead and, just because I have total recall doesn't mean everybody else does.
Okay, yeah, so in the late 19th century, the British felt that they needed these dum-dum bullets to control civil populations around the world. And I suppose most people, including myself, heard of it vaguely, but didn't think that there'd be any interest persisting through World War I and World War II right up to the present. Well, I think we now have a lot of circumstantial evidence that a man called Victor Rothschild, former chairman of NM Rothschild and Sons and Churchill's right-hand man for the science that went on in the so-called Churchill's toy shop. This guy, Victor Rothschild, was a chemist and a biologist. And it appears he played a principal role in the corruption of the United States and the UK Patent Office, including, or not excluding, the idea of the so-called biological bullet. And nominally, the biological bullet was patented by a guy called Jerome Lemelson, who has 605 patents to his name. The guy is a total fraud. Of course, he's dead now, so we can't rip him out of hell and hang him on the yardarm, but maybe we can do that to some of the people that supported this technique that he didn't develop, he didn't invent it. He'd hang around in the weeds studying which way Sony was going, for example, with its research and development, and then structure a patent that would anticipate where Sony might arrive in 5 years' time. So he did a lot of the technology related to the camcorders, etc. And I would say he would lie in the weeds for maybe 10 years or 20 years before springing a patent violation suit on a targeted company, and they'd pay him protection money because by then they were so heavily invested in producing whatever it was that he claimed to have invented, they'd rather pay him to go away than take him on in the courts. So I would say that film called Sex, Lies and Videotape would made very heavy use of Lemelson's stolen technology, which he'd share with anyone. I mean, basically he was a patent pimp. And right through to making snuff films out at the pig farm in British Columbia. But I digress. So Victor Rothschild, my allegation would be that he refined the dum-dum bullet into hollow-nose biological bullets into which could be inserted, let's say, ricin or anthrax or anticoagulants or hallucinogens or paralytics or something that made the victim extremely, extremely pained and in agony, and they would scream. Now, I got a friend whose friends were painting a house late on a Friday night when they had raves at the pig farm. And I think what he told me, they were about 50 yards from the pig farm, which used to have or attract raves of about 1,700 or 2,000 people. And they heard a scream that put the hairs on the back of their necks up, and they'd never heard the embodiment of pain and agony to that extent, and they literally left the scene. I think they reported to the police the following day, but the matter died. And here's you have an example of the pathetic crime scene investigation skills in Canada, and no doubt in the United States and in the United Kingdom as well, because women were being disappeared at the pig farm from 1983 right through to 2002, when Robert Picton was arrested. And some of my First Nations friends reckon there might have been 100 women killed out at the pig farm, and quite possibly, in some cases, their children. And that makes me somewhat cross, because I think Abel Danger has spent now, 2006, what's that, 12 years or so, I think, communicating to people how to look at crime scenes like this. And the great majority of them have done fuck all, excuse the French.
Well, David, do you expect to get any reaction?
Yes, I do, because I think we communicate as clearly as we can, and the onus is on the people who've got their head up their arse to take it out and listen. Now, I may be being optimistic, but I am getting optimistic, because I think we do have momentum now. But more particularly, I think we can thread this bullet without an exit hole argument in terms of wrongful deaths through a number of high-profile murders and assassinations, including JFK and Vince Foster and Commerce Secretary Ron Brown. Now, I think it was only yesterday or the day before, I was thinking about this Harper fragment that blew out of the back of Kennedy's head in Dealey Plaza. Apparently it was about 6 square inches. And then I read a little more about the absence of an exit hole. Do you understand, because I'm not too familiar with this stuff, what is a full metal jacket, a round of ammunition? What does that mean in terms of impact on a victim? Over to you, Phil.
I think it means it's not going to disintegrate and it's going to go straight through, but don't bother asking me, and you don't have to know either. In our chat room right now, there's one, and there may be two ballistic experts. One's Jack Mack, and if he's not tearing the M22 rock crusher transmission out of an old Camaro, he might answer. And there's another guy who doesn't look like he's in the chat room today. I'll just scan through because maybe I'm confused. I think his name is LW, and I'm not sure where he's from, but I am sure he's not in the chat room. But if LW shows up, he might talk about a full metal jacket. But another thing one can always do, and I'll do it right now, well, hopefully Jack Mack gets time to put something in. I'm just going to go Google full metal jacket, because that's what I do all day long. Oh, by the way, for anybody in the chat room, that I see that Braveheart just put up a picture of my head going backwards through the countryside on a steam train, a couple stops south of Langolan, and there was a song on that particular image and text box. There was a song by a group called Oasis. Was anybody outside the UK familiar with that song that I put in the text box? And off the top of my head, the name of the song is Don't Look Back in Anger. But anyway, I was just hemming and hawing there, because Jack Mack says a full metal jacket bullet is a small arms projectile consisting of a soft core, often lead, encased in a shell of harder metal, such as gilding metal, cupro nickel, or less commonly steel. And then right below it, Braveheart put up some pictures. 115, 124, Remington, somebody I can't pronounce, and Winchester. One of those companies just filed for bankruptcy. I think it's Remington. And then from Eager Beaver, a full metal jacket is small arms, blah, blah, blah. Oh, look at this. He got it out of the same Google search that you know who got it out of. And then there's a picture from Braveheart, HP plus full metal jacket. And so there's your answer, I think, David, if you want to take a look later on. But anyway, pressing on, what would you like to head for next?
Well, thank you very much for all those folks who put in those images. It's very interesting because I can see you've got HP, I guess that's hollow point, beside the image of FMG full metal jacket.
FMJ.
FMJ. And you can see the hollow point, obviously. And what the British, in conjunction with the United States Patent and Trademark Office and various obscene traitors in the senior executive service, they had this brainwave. Why don't they put something inside the hollow point, which might be, as I say, ricin or anthrax or anti-coagulant, and then procure 1.4 billion rounds of hollow point ammunition for use by the Department of Homeland Security, which begs the question, what the hell is General Kelly doing? Because we've told him about that, and we've asked him to do a little search. Well, there's Braveheart, and I guess there's a hollow point with something that sort of encapsulated whatever was put inside the hollowness before firing this kit. Now, when or if James E. Files is correct in saying that he used a mercury-filled bullet to kill Kennedy, when and if that mercury-filled bullet hit Kennedy just above the right temple or right eye and entered the brain, the effect of the mercury would have been to create a pressure wave inside the brain matter and fluid and literally explode Kennedy's skull. Obviously, the weakest point would be the part where the metal fragments struck the back of the skull, and that's where evidently you got that 6 square inch Harper fragment, which they tried to, I don't know, patch up or fill or basically manipulate the x-rays after the event. So the evidence of the absence of an exit wound, now some people would say, well, the fragment is the exit wound, but that's not a characteristic of a full metal jacket shell, as I understand it, because like you said a little earlier, the full metal jacket bullet is going to go straight through the victim's skull and come out the other side, and there should be an exit hole. So I think we're zeroing in on something really interesting, because it turns out that no one saw an exit hole on the Vince Foster body. His glasses were found about 19 feet away, very little blood in Fort Marcy Park around the body. So it looked like he'd either been dropped on the ground, actually on a slope, feet down, head up, or dragged through the bush, and either dead on arrival or shot out, and no, dead on arrival, I guess. And then you have Ron Brown, and there's x-ray of his skull, and it does suggest that in that crash, can you just go over quickly the circumstances of the Ron Brown crash? Was he on the correct slope for landing at that airport in Dubrovnik? Can you just remind us what happened there, Field? Over to you.
I don't know if he was on the correct glide slope or not. That's the vertical guidance electronically, and I'm not sure they had any vertical guidance. If they're doing a non-precision approach, what they do is they establish certain altitudes measured either in MSL, mean sea level, which means you have to get the local barometer, or AGL, which is above ground level, which probably wasn't what they were using because they were out, they were over uneven territory. But it's my assertion, and I've been asserting this for as long as you and I have ever discussed it, that the azimuth guidance, which is it's broadcast or it emanates from a portable unit that is positioned at a known location, meaning a very specific set of latitude and longitude coordinates, and from there it emits azimuth guidance. And the aircraft, in this case, it was a Boeing T-43, which is an old-fashioned 737 similar to what crashed in Cuba 4 days ago. And David, are you aware that a 737 crashed in Cuba on Friday?
Yes.
Are you aware that there were 20 evangelists on there who were critical of the Pope?
No.
Okay, I got to make you more aware. But anyway, they like to use airplanes to kill people, as we may have seen in Cuba. And as we certainly saw in the case of Ron Brown, who had a bullet hole through his head before they drove the airplane into the ground, just to make absolutely sure that the shooter didn't screw up his mission of killing Ron Brown. Somebody in the chat room is about ready to put the reason or the rationale or the motive behind the Ron Brown murder, and I can't remember the specific motive, but it involved the Clintons, plural, and Ron Brown had told Peyronie's breath and foul BVR that he wasn't going to take the fall for something the Clintons had done and been found out doing. So they decided he needed to die, and they don't mind at all killing a whole plane load just to get a target. And so the azimuth on this portable landing guidance device was slewed too far to the higher terrain side of the safe final approach course. So when the low experienced T-43 pilot flying the the Boeing 737 derivative, when he comes whistling into town thinking he's going to get the secretary of whatever he was in charge of, commerce, I think, or maybe it was taking bullets to the head, which is very common position in the Clinton administrations. When the T-43 aircraft commander and his co-pilot came whistling into that area of whatever it was, wherever they were killing Serbs and Christians and Muslims and let me think about this, I'm forgetting, oh yes, gypsies. So we were in there, the United States was in there doing some custom killing for the fake royals, and the pilots were aware that they were going to fly a non-precision approach, but they were assuming that both the approach facility, which was portable, was positioned correctly, and that its azimuth was slewed correctly. And my guess, nobody will ever know, of course, because Clintons are very good at not only getting rid of evidence, but also attempting to kill people that can expose them for what they truly are, which is killers of blacks. In today's radio show ad, there's a radio show image, and underneath the image it says Clinton, on two different statements under the image, it says kill blacks plus Clinton, and one of them says 80-1076, and that's in reference to the fact that the Clintons used a U-2 to kill blacks at both Katrina in 2005 and then again in Haiti in, was it 2010 or 11? Sometimes I forget. But anyway, the motive in both cases was making money off killing blacks. I think truly the Clintons just don't like black people. That you can find, in fact, I hope someone in our chat room right now finds a picture of Bill and Hillary dressed up like a black couple going to a Halloween party. Fairly disrespectful. But then at Haiti, their lust for money and killing was such that after they created the Harpquake, and I'm saying Harpquake, H-A-A-R-P, the Harpquake was controlled by a U-2. Once again, the tail number is 80-1076. It flew out of Ramey Air Force Base, which ceased to exist in 1973, so you have to be old to remember it. But I'm old and I remember it. It's now called CGAS, Coast Guard Air Station Brinklin, and the original old very large hangars that used to house B-29s and B-52s, they housed this U-2 80-1076 for a number of nights leading up to the Haiti heartquake. And for people that don't believe in God, go ahead and don't believe, doesn't matter to me. But what are the odds that I would intersect and thereby intercept the crew that was escorting the U-2 out of Puerto Rico and back to California? And just sort of, it happened when I was attending a Ramey Air Force Base reunion in Warner Robins, Georgia, and that was probably in 2009 or 10. I can't remember. I can go Google some pictures and find out. But the Clintons and other people like the Clintons, John Kerry, Lumpjaw, and my sister, the Bush group. I hate to call them a Bush family because they're a bunch of misfits. But they all think they've gotten away with this. They never got away with it. It was known the minute it happened. And whether people want to give credit to humans for unraveling it, they can go ahead and do that if they want. I can tell you the reason that I happened to bump into the crew of the U-2 at Warner Robins, Georgia, is simply because I wanted to go to a Ramey reunion at the same time the U-2 that attacked Haiti to kill a bunch of people and displace a bunch of young people so that the Clintons could then take all those young orphans and turn them into objects of sexual deviancy, and then if they weren't pretty enough to be used in that regard, they could have their organs harvested. And this is a very clear indictment, and my name is F-I-E-L-D, Field McConnell, and I'm claiming that the Clinton Foundation used a U-2 serial number 80-1076 to kill black people in Haiti and blame it on a earthquake that didn't really happen. And how do I know that? Well, because the relief for the earthquake got there the day before the earthquake existed. So, and there was I think it was an Army Huey helicopter pilot. It was certainly an Army officer that died on site in Haiti, and I am speculating that he died because when he got there on day 2 and the earthquake happened, he or some other sharp troop, and in the military there still exist sharp troops, but they're usually in the enlisted forces, not the watered down, mamby-pamby, politically correct officer shortcomings. So my heart goes out to the enlisted people in the world's militaries, all countries. It doesn't matter whose team they're on. They should all be on the team of love and respect and get over this Rothschilds type killing for money. And I think once the Bushes, the Marcys, the Clintons, and the Soteros are dealt with, I think it'll become a less popular pastime, at least in the United States of America. So David, did I answer your question or just open Pandora's box?
No, that's cool, Phil, because I think this idea that people are being eliminated and a lot of collateral damage is being done to the people around them, so they go for a high-value target where, let's say hypothetically, a John O'Neill or a Carlton Bartels in the vicinity of the Twin Towers would be high-value targets. Carlton Bartels because he had a patent for a carbon dioxide electronic trading system that the forces in control of the patent office wanted from him. So he was killed, and I believe that patent was passed through his widow to, I think his name is Franklin Raines, the VP or the president of Fannie Mac, I guess. And so that enriched Franklin Raines and impoverished the estate of Carlton Bartels. And then you have John O'Neill, who I think was a seasoned FBI investigator, who probably knew that Oliver Buck Revell was a major player in the planning by the FBI of the stand down on 9/11, and he was in the vicinity of the World Trade Center. So I think these 9/11 SWAT teams deployed by your sister would have gone after the high-value targets, and to make absolutely sure they're dead, shot them with a bullet that would have released some highly toxic substance into their bodies, so they were known to have been died, even if the injury from the bullet was not necessarily fatal in terms of kinetic energy. So I would guess, for example, in the Pentagon upgrade on the morning of 9/11, someone like Captain Gerald DeConto, the duty officer, he would have been approached by a SWAT team deployed through AMEC, which has an office in 425 Carroll Street, and probably shot. Now, whether his colleagues would have noticed it, I think, let's say, they would have been so horrified they wouldn't necessarily have responded in a timely manner. But I would guess Captain Gerald DeConto was on the phone to Secretary of the Navy Gordon England, and someone walked up beside him and put one of these hollow point bullets into his body, and he died maybe instantaneously or within a few seconds. And that means that the missile battery on the roof of the Pentagon was not released to take out the incoming, where they'd switched the technology over through the friend or foe, identification of friend or foe technology invented by the British in World War II and transferred to the Americans as part of the Tizard mission. I think the first company to make IFF technology was a British company called Ferranti. Going back to the Rothschild, which you mentioned earlier, Victor Rothschild stole an example of the cavity magnetron from the laboratory of the professor at Birmingham University who was developing it. He returned it a couple of days later, saying you've got to be more careful of your security. But some people, perhaps myself included, believe that Victor Rothschild sent images or pictures or details of the cavity magnetron, which helped to win the Battle of the Atlantic, to a number of players, including a Lord Arthur Semple in Japan. That would have allowed the Imperial Japanese Navy to equip their aircraft with cavity magnetrons that would have been able to pick up the targets in Pearl Harbor for the bombing campaign, and quite possibly broadcast spoof IFF signals, identification of friend or foe, which would have got the people operating the RCA technology in Pearl Harbor to stand down. So the idea of taking out the high-value target with a specialized bullet, which, independent of the physical damage to the body, guarantees that they're dead, and then killing everyone around them as part of the intimidation procedure and spoliation of evidence, I think is very compelling for the bad guys. What do you think, Field? Over to you.
I wasn't listening, but you were talking about a variety of bullets, and I had a random thought that was sort of funny, but I'll just keep it to myself, because as you told me about 11 years ago, and then you've proven for the last 10 years, humor doesn't travel well. I see some flattering pictures of Hillary Clinton, but believe me, these have been photoshopped because she's a lot less attractive than those. I want to say that Hugh just said, do I notice Admiralty tassels on the flags in the Jerusalem desert? Yes, you do. That's what Desert Pete, who I can't tell you his real name, but he did us a favor. I bet he doesn't even know. In fact, I'll ask you, Desert Pete, this is to demonstrate relative memory capacity. Desert Pete, do you remember what day you sent me a very important email about a missile? Yes or no? Well, I wait for Desert Pete to answer that, and I bet he'll be close if he doesn't hit it exactly. U, which stands for Utica, which means nothing. It means a lot to certain people. Let me see if McTurk is here today, and then I'll get back to your bullet question, presuming you remember your bullet question, David. Duke McTurk is here today. Duke McTurk is a professor and a leader at a university called Utica. I think it's Utica College, maybe Utica University. Doesn't really matter, to me or to Hugh. But somehow Hugh, who is from Llangollen, North Wales, wanted to get into this chat room, and somehow he came in contact with Duke McTurk. But I always say, and I truly believe, or I wouldn't be saying it always, that we have the most lethal and fastest chat room in existence. And, you know, if there's something that one of us has a question on, oh, okay, good. Desert Pete just answered. He said, just a few days after the event, I'd have to check my outbound box. Well, I don't bother checking. On Monday, the 8th of November of 2010, I saw something go by on my computer screen that made me quite certain we were going to have an aviation false flag soon. And so you can't contact the FBI or the Navy intelligence and say, hi, I'm a private citizen that had to quit flying for Northwest because I knew too much. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have an aviation false flag this week or soon. You know, they'd throw it in the garbage. So that's not how I operate. So what I did was I sent them a message, and I don't think I can prove this. Somebody may have a copy of my email, because a lot of people that have been in our chat room over the years do archive stuff. But I can't prove it because our friends at Bluffdale, or is it Bluffton? Anyway, in Utah, there's an NSA facility that's larger underground than above ground. And in the summer of 2011, they helped themselves to two of my email accounts, one being avalonbeef@msn.com, and the other being, this is really funny, so make sure you listen if you have a sense of humor, or you just need a little emotional lift. My second email address, which they helped themselves to, was fbi@usdoj.gr. Back then, David and I had a IT pro in Greece that was helping us, and we had a website in Greece, and therefore I had an email address with a Greece following letter pair. So David, I think I have forgotten your question about bullets, but we'll get back to that in a minute. I just want to point out that Hugh is not from Utica, but Hugh is the member of the family there in North Wales, where Denise and I spent 6 nights recently, and we just hated to leave yesterday about 10:40. But we had a wonderful vacation. I'm sure we'll be there again. Hopefully, it may be before this summer's over. More likely, it'll be in September to May time frame of September 2018 to May of 2019, depending on how things go. And I never know how things are going. For instance, I may be on Delta Flight 11 tomorrow heading to Minneapolis. I don't think I will be. I could be on Delta Flight 11 on Wednesday heading to Minneapolis. I hope I won't be. I almost certainly will be leaving the current location where I'm in Denise's hot kitchen, somewhere within 3 miles of Farnborough, where not only they have great air shows, but they occasionally have subterranean trafficking of narcotics and other things. There's a bunch of tunnels under Farnborough, probably because of World War II. I don't know. But when tunnels are no longer needed, that's not to say they're no longer used. There's tunnels under Washington, D.C. that were used in Pizzagate, which, of course, the Clintons and Kristine Marcy, my sister, said didn't exist. But others say it does exist. So I want to thank Hugh and the rest of the people that brightened up the week for Denise and I last week. And we spent Friday evening, we had a group meeting of Abel Danger people at the Cornmill restaurant, and then the following night we had a smaller gathering of some different people at the Gallery restaurant. And David, here's where you might want to perk up your ears. You might not want to, but it crossed my mind when I was up there in Hugh's hometown, and I saw something called they call it the Ladies of Langolan, but it's a remarkable piece of property that 2 unmarried women occupied starting around 1788 until the second of them died somewhere around 1850. And I think that would be a great village to probably get a group of 40 to 50 people from North America to join another equal-sized group from the UK and spend 5 days or 7 days in that town just relaxing and touring on foot or on a steam train or on a canal boat. There's there's so much history up there that's pleasant to be surrounded by, and there's absolutely nothing negative. Denise and I have spent a total of 9 nights up there, and we've never seen anything that we wish we didn't see, and we certainly couldn't say that anywhere in America, including where I live, Plum City, which is pretty darn nice too. So David, you asked me about a bullet. You don't remember the significance of the question, do you?
Yeah, I was talking about the idea that your sister's Con Air SWAT teams, their MO is to ensure that the fatal hit on a high-value target and surround the area with disinformation, media injections, fake news, and spoliators to cover their track. So in some cases that involves a high-value target like, I don't know, Carlton Bartels at the Cantor Fitzgerald offices at the top of the North Tower, and the necessity to kill 657 of his colleagues, with the exception of the chief executive officer of Cantor Fitzgerald, namely Howard Lutnick, who just happened to have invented a interactive real-time wagering system on event outcomes. So I'm looking now every time I see an incident. I haven't looked at that Cuban crash yet, Field, but I'm happy to if there's something suspicious about it. I'm looking always now for an MO where the high-value target can be identified for the possibility that they've used some combination of patented devices extorted from the patentee or the assignee or the inventor. That is to say, Boeing, let's say, invents a Honeywell Honeywell invents an uninterruptible autopilot in the belief it will be useful for anti-hijacking, and then Boeing gets extorted by these vermin, including your sister, through the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund, and someone in Boeing takes a lot of money in their bank account. Let's say back on 911, that might be General John, the late General John Shalikashvili, whose father, Dmitry Shalikashvili, was a major in the Waffen SS, who lied about his past to get into the United States. He brought his son, John Shalikashvili, at 6 years old. They lived in, I think, Illinois somewhere. And Shalikashvili obviously had a career that took him to the position of chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So he gets sent by the treasonous Bill Clinton in 1997 to give a talk to the People's Liberation Army University in Beijing, where he told the generals that he'd been instructed by his president to leave behind details of all America's weapons programs. Well, as you sow, so shall ye reap. Americans don't pay attention to what's happening to their intellectual property. It's stolen by the Chinese, and then it's turned around and used amongst the various bankers and shareholders of Serco on the 47th floor on 911 for death pool betting, which actually is very simply understood as you place bets on the time of a high-value victim's death, like Carlton Bartels or John O'Neill, and at the same time maybe on the body count after the dust has settled, how many corpses or body bits or even if vaporized individuals have disappeared. And I think 657 victims in Cantor Fitzgerald constitutes the grounds, I believe, for what I would call an injured community for a class action suit. And I'm very confident that one day 343 firefighters, the relatives of 343 firefighters, will stand up and be counted, and I think we can help bring them justice by a docudrama that describes the facts of the crime scene, which I understand to be what's known in Latin as the actus reus of the crime scene, which pays none or very little attention to the motives or the individuals who executed the crime, because you can't get to those until you know what hit the individual firefighters. And I found to my horror that the fire chief of the fire department of New York, I think his name is Gansey, I'm not how you, Peter James Gansey Jr., who appears to have gone to the South Tower and then come back to the North Tower after the South Tower collapse, and he was using a multi-channel Motorola radio that I believe had been modified with Motorola's dynamic encryption key selection for encrypted radio transmission, which would have allowed the conspirators to transmit the ignition signal to incendiaries in the elevator. So poor Chief Ganshi was actually the unknowing recipient of an ignition signal that was relayed through his multi-channel radio into the building. The firefighters' radios had been jammed, so they didn't get the evacuation signal. And it was a, what's a good word, a genocidal ambush. Probably the biggest single ambush of a given profession. I mean, many other people were killed. But when you think about it, 343 firefighters killed in the same day when two steel frame buildings with 200,000 tons of structural steel in each came down through fire for the first time in history, subsequently followed at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon by the steel frame building known as building number 7. No one was killed there because they'd obviously, I think your sister shared an office with a lesbian pedophile lover. I don't know if there was a pedophile lover, but Leonora Guaria, I think it was you who told me, used to go on tours with your sister of Romanian orphanages. Well, at least they used to go on holidays to Romania, and of course there was a whole lot of little girls available to these two women in the orphanages in Romania, but it's pretty appalling to think about it. But then again, why wouldn't they when America managed to have a pedophile lesbian alcoholic by the name of Janet Reno as Attorney General? So anyway, I'm not rubbishing America or the United Kingdom or Australia or New Zealand or Canada. I'm just saying that there's a level of evil that's crept into our respective countries. And I'll just read what was attributed to J. Edgar Hoover. Yet the individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. The American mind simply has not come to a realization of the evil which has been introduced into our midst. It rejects even the assumption that human creatures could espouse a philosophy which must ultimately destroy all that is good and decent. Now, I don't know how evil Edgar Hoover was, but I think that's a fairly pithy remark. I think it's very true. I think people, first of all, they don't want to hear this kind of shit. There are good people up in BC who I meet every day, and when I talk about what I think happened out at the pig farm, and that the Crown had found each of the victims had been shot, and the possibility they were using biological bullets to bet how long it would take a woman in agony up on a stage in front of 1,700 people to die, they want to tune me out. I don't blame them. Sometimes I want to tune me out, but ultimately we're driven to do what we have to do. So over to you, Phil.
Yes, and while you were telling us things we didn't want to hear, someone posted a quote by Gene Wheaton where he said that when he was a cooperator, meaning he cooperated with operators, the people he cooperated with, meaning the assassins from Washington, D.C., perhaps Marine Quantico, perhaps the SEAL base at Little Creek, these paid killers that worked for people like G.H.W. Bush or Bill Clinton, they thought nothing of killing a plane load, say a 747, just to get a target or two. Well, that brings us up to a current event, which was in Cuba, when the 737 that was 40 years old took off, made a right turn, and then spiraled into the ground. Sounds to me like the right engine had an uncontained failure. I'm not saying that, so people can quote me, I don't care. But I'm just telling you, if you quote me on this, you might be quoting something that's not correct. But the dynamics of the flight path from where it was a normal takeoff to where it ended in death for a whole slug of people. It's very consistent with a catastrophic loss of the right engine and then a stall due to the fact that airline pilots today are not taught to fly airplanes. And I'm not sure where the problem started with airline pilots, but I think if somebody were to look back around 1985, when United, American, Northwest, and if there were any other big airlines left at that time, they started having a two-tiered pay scale. It's called the B scale, which could tell you, if you were prescient back in 1985, what the end game of the airlines was, and that is to remove the pilots. But they did it sequentially. They did it around 1985 by putting the superfluous lower-end pilots on a B-scale pay scale, which is starvation wages. Then in 1989, along came the Boeing 747-400, which was operated by a two-man crew instead of a three-man crew. So the bean counters that ran the airlines back then thought they were going to save some money, but they didn't save a whole lot because they could only operate that airplane for 8 hours, whereas if it had a third crew member, they could have operated it for 12 hours. So instead of having an expensive captain, an expensive co-pilot, and a dirt cheap engineer, they ended up with an expensive captain and either an expensive relief captain or two expensive co-pilots. So the bean counters at the airlines, you know, like the CEOs that were in on 9/11, and notice for the record, I did not say anything about United and American CEOs being in on 9/11, but their investors sure were, because there were a whole lot of shorts, meaning short sale orders for both United and American a couple of days before the 9/11 attack on America was perpetrated by General Maurice Burrell and Captain Rick Finley and ham-fisted helo pilot Charles Bouchard and a guy named Angus Watt and a pervert, not only a pervert, but a gay pervert, Russell Williams, who was the Canadian pilot assigned to haul the Queen when she wanted to go out to Western Canada and make sure nobody was squealing on the 1964 mass graves of Indigenous children or the Mohawks that were killed. And I think about maybe 7 years ago, David, there was a man who lived on the streets in Vancouver who was an eyewitness. He was a survivor of these mass graves in 1964 in places that were visited by the goose-stepping geriatric and Prince Fartingham. And when he started talking about 7 years ago, he suddenly got a hangnail and died in a hospital in Vancouver, British Columbia. So when you say that you're not besmirching countries like the United States, Canada, and New Zealand, and Australia, I think there's no reason to badmouth them, because the effluence that flows into all those countries comes from one location and one location only. And because I'm a man of few words, I won't identify the location, but I think maybe the fourth or fifth picture down on today's radio show shows a stern, jealous old woman staring at a young, beautiful woman. And I think that regardless of all the excuses made for that person, if that is a person, you know, the cameras don't lie, history doesn't lie, and God doesn't look favorably on liars. And the greatest deceiver the world has ever seen fell from heaven. But there's some deceivers that are pretty good, at least they think they are, and they exist in castles today in a variety of European countries, and they're not getting away with... David, I don't want to offend you, so if you're going to be easily offended, would you plug your ears?
Go ahead, Phil.
Are your ears plugged?
I doubt if you'll offend me.
Yeah, these people don't know jack shit about fuck all, and all of their crimes are going to be exposed. They are all known to God, and if either you or I or both of us think that we're going to change things, we might participate in changing things, but the changing's being done at a much higher level above us and a much lower level below us in the hearts of those who would endeavor to oppress their fellow man, not being aware of the fact that their fellow man is just as important to the Creator as they are. And God has no favorites, and that would include these people that dress up and think that they're special. In today's radio show, I had to hurry to put it together since Denise and I were driving yesterday, reluctantly. We drove 3 miles an hour all the way back from North Wales because we didn't really want to leave. But we left, but we'll be back. But in the meantime, those people who are trying to oppress all the people of the world, I truly believe they think they've succeeded. And just as truly, I believe they don't know anything about reality, and when reality hits them in the face, just like J. Edgar Hoover said, it's a little difficult to believe. And after their numerous generational living of a lie, it's probably going to come as a real shock to the inhabitants of Frogmore House that there's more frogs on the inside of the house than there are in the sculpted lawns that surround them. There's a message for only a few people to get. Okay, David, over to you.
Yeah, and you talk about the Queen, and you may be right. You're certainly justified in your own opinion. I look at the little John Benet Ramsey, the photographs, and there is, to a lay person like myself, very clear evidence of a taser. I think that shoots a couple of needles with 50,000 volts between them. It may have been ramped up in her case because I think the outfit that invented the taser said that it would be unusual to create those kind of scorch marks. And so then I asked myself, well, who was issuing tasers in 1996 to the kind of professional body that might care to use them on children or women? And unfortunately, I find that these tasers were issued to the United States Marshals Service while your sister was senior counsel.
Okay,
So
let me stop
son-
you right there. The UK operates the U.S. Marshal Service. You have no question about that, do you?
I don't think it does.
Well, you're wrong. Did you read today's radio show ad?
Yeah.
Did you read the PDF about Social Security and who runs it?
No.
I didn't think so. Carry on.
Okay. In 1994, your sister created an extraordinary organization, it would appear, with Hillary Clinton at the Department of Justice called the DOJ Pride, which represents the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered interests of the FBI, the United States Marshal Service, the Bureau of Prisons, Department of Justice programs, and people, I believe, in the ATFE. What was that? What does ATFE stand for? Alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives. And just following the custody of the weapons issued to these people, and I don't know, I believe going back up the chain of custody, we will find that Serco, that is effectively run the United States Patent and Trademark Office and the UK Patent Office with its investment banker NM Rothschild. There is no doubt in my mind, if that's what you're saying, that the taser, the approval for tasers to be issued to the marshals would have come through Rothschild and Serco. But there's no doubt in my mind that little John Benet Ramsey was shot with a taser. The question is why she was shot, and was that taser, or did that taser have a sufficiently high voltage to kill her? I think the purpose of the extraordinary level of cruelty visited on the body of little JonBenet Ramsey while she was alive was intended to send a message, of course, to her father, who was the chief executive officer of Access Graphics, which was a wholly owned subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. And the ransom note for $118,000 suggested someone inside the chain of command of Lockheed Martin knew that this was a bonus figure paid to JonBenet Ramsey. And therefore, they might have the money to pay from the bonus that's appeared in his bank account to pay for the blackmail or the ransom note. But I think there was another purpose. I don't think they really wanted the money. I think they wanted to send a message to the colleagues of the father in Lockheed Martin that they wanted access to the Lockheed Martin patent pool. So at the time of that murder, which may have been, if I'm right about the 50,000 volts designed to kill JonBenet Ramsey, they might have sent a message that this would be midnight on Christmas Day of 1996, very significant day for Christians, so that they would demonstrate that they could kill this little girl exactly at midnight on 1996 if there was some deathbedding going on, and intimidate the people in Lockheed Martin to abdicating their responsibility in terms of making sure that Lockheed Martin equipment was not used in the 9/11 attack. Well, it looks like they succeeded, because someone in Lockheed Martin, and I think the two directors of interest are Lynn Cheney and Norman Mineta, approved, or would appear to have approved, the use of a hardened target penetrator produced or invented by Lockheed Martin to take out the Pentagon. I think you don't need to be an expert in ballistics to realize that a passenger jet hitting the outside of the Pentagon at, I don't know what, 500 miles an hour or whatever, would not be able to punch a hole through 8 walls into the inner courtyard and create an entirely circular ring with about a ton and a half of debris on the inner courtyard. So the nice thing about that field is we don't need to attribute guilt, or for that matter innocence, to the crime scene if we focus on the what and the how, because the moment we understand the what and the how, i.e. what weapons or what special weapons we used, we can then determine who had custody of that weapons, because if they didn't have custody of that weapon at that crime scene at that time, they can't be said to have had the opportunity, irrespective of the motive. So in that exercise on 911 called Global Guardian, we can see that there were a number of events taking place requiring access to some very sophisticated technology, including identification of friend or foe, precision navigation, radar, a lot of which would have come from the Brits in World War II in the Tizard mission. But some very interesting hedging of bets was taken by the Brits, because with the cavity magnetron, for example, that helped win the Battle of the Atlantic, there was a patent taken out in 1940, about the time of the Tizard mission, for the cavity magnetron by none other than RCA, Radio Corporation of America. I presume Radio Corporation of America at that time would have been run or controlled by a guy called David Sarnoff. And it looks like David Sarnoff and the Brits had a cozy little arrangement where they would allow the Americans to produce the cavity magnetron, but maintain patent control of the device itself for the future revenue. So I think it's a very fruitful, I hope it's a very fruitful approach, using the actus reus analysis of what actually happened at a crime scene, and looking perhaps a little further down the road at who had the custody of those weapons, and therefore the opportunity to use them, and one day maybe getting these people in a public court, a court of public justice, or whatever you will, to determine their relative level of guilt as seen by we the people. Over to you, Phil.
Well, if you would have looked at today's radio show and seen the PDF that I put in there, and now it's been put in fact, start at the bottom, there's of the chat room. There is a picture of an F-16 where Agent JR says, "What is that plane, Braveheart?" And the picture is an F-16. Then above it is another picture of a Lockheed SR-75, which may or may not exist, I don't know. Keep going. Then there's Sikorsky. Then there's your little Japanese twerp, Norman Mineta. Then there's an F-22 with AK on the tail. Then there's 3 different flying vehicles. Then there's the person that you keep defending, the Queen. And then keep going up with me. We're going to find a PDF. We went past a frog, a red, white, and blue frog. I'm still going up. There's a frog with a French flag. And somewhere up here, we are going to find... oops, I must have gone by it. Let's go back down below the French frog. Somewhere Gobsmack put up a link. And I hope I catch it this time by... Gobsmack, yes. Okay, do you see the picture of a little purple frog hanging on a green plant?
Me?
Yes.
Let me just go and look.
Scroll up from the bottom till you see an orange background, a purple frog hanging on a green plant.
Yeah. Ah, yes, yes.
Okay, scroll down. There's Desert Pete, Oversight, Agent JR, then me, and then Gobsmack, and there's a link. And it ends in underscore echo november.pdf, ENPDF. Do you see that link?
No, I got lost.
Well, then go back to the purple frog hanging on the green plant.
Right.
Okay. Underneath there's Desert Pete, correct?
Yes.
Then Oversight.
Yes.
Then Agent JR.
Yes.
Then me.
Yes.
Then Gobsmack.
Yes.
If you open that PDF and read it at your leisure, you will find that the Queen, or the UK monarch, but in this case it's Queen Elizabeth II, controls Social Security of the vast majority of the countries of the world. And so you may say that it's hard to tell where weapons came from, and you may say they came from my sister's office, but my sister has been an agent of the globalist going back to 1966. And my sister and Senior Executive Service and Serco and the Royals and Lockheed Martin, there's other links in this radio show ad that you didn't look at, apparently, that prove that this stuff all emanates from a single source. And you may not enjoy that. If you told me the single source was Denise, I would deny it too, but denying it doesn't make it untrue. And the UK royals, who think they grew up, and I know they grew up because I put a picture of Queen Elizabeth in today's radio show where she's hailing Hitler, and that picture was taken a long, long time ago. Maybe you missed it. But the true history of the British Empire is that the sun never used to set on it, and if the world is to survive in a habitable manner, which is not something that the UK royals and the globalists wish, they wish for us to be reduced to 500 million, I find it rather hypocritical at the least that if the globalists and the Kennedys, excuse me, not the Kennedys, the Clintons, that's the would-be Kennedys, if the Kennedys, the Bushes, my sister, and Barry Swatero and his husband think that genocide and smaller populations are essential, I wonder why they don't demonstrate a little leadership and kill themselves. Until then, you can go ahead and pick the weapon or the motive or the opportunity, who has the opportunity. I like to go to the source, and I found the source, and it's in that PDF. Over to you, David.
Okay, well, I think you're perfectly entitled to go after the source, and I'm perfectly entitled to go after the actus reus at the crime scene, and probably we'll meet somewhere in the middle.
Well, that would be ideal.
Okay, shall we finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Bye now.
Oh, he's gone.
No.
Did you hear what he said? He said, thanks, Phil. Bye now. Did you hear him say it? Mm. Well, I don't think he wanted to go, do you? Okay, a question to the chat room. I'm absolutely sure that David just said, are we finished? And then he said, bye now. Welcome back.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't mean to go on a bad note, Field. I just meant, that we have, I don't know that we have an irreconcilable position, but I'm very interested. You focus on the source, I focus on the facts, and I think whether it's the middle or not, that's the way to arrive at a final, not a judgment.
Oh, I do too.
If that's the right word.
But then you said, are we finished? Goodbye now. That's what I was confused by.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, all the best. I hope you're continuing to have a great time there. And until the next show.
Okay, so we are done now.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, you hang up on yourself so I don't get accused of anything, please. Oh, I'm supposed to play something according to Billy My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may perfect your faith, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind. There's a reason why Braveheart suggested that scripture, and it's interesting that Braveheart also put up a song that I just played. Thank you, Braveheart, for putting it up. That said, it makes me just feel like crying, 'cause baby, something beautiful's dying. But in 1965, Chad and Jeremy, in a song called The Summer Song, it had this lyric, which also applies somewhat to the James lyric, and meaning James 1, 2 through 6, as well as You've Lost That Loving Feeling. In Chad and Jeremy's song, it lamented, they say that all good things must end someday. Autumn leaves must fall. But don't you know that it hurts me so to say goodbye to you? Boy, I'm sure glad nobody put that song up, because I can't come close to hitting those high notes. Wish you didn't have to go. Oh, no, no, no. And when the rain, nor is it wind. Anyway, beautiful songs when I grew up, and the world I'm living in today, and the beauty of the world I used to live in, was the ignorance that I had, and the naivety that myself and my family had. Now I'll get on to other orders of business before somebody puts up the big red button. Captain McHale says, Field, will I see you Friday? And I have 2 phone calls that I anticipate. One is from Agent Gobsmack. Let me see if he's still in the chat room, because if he's not, yep, he's still here. For security purposes, he goes by Gobanks, but he's really Agent Gobsmack. And so I need to talk to him about it's not really personal, although in this case it is personal. I want to make sure that I have a will that passes muster with the UK solicitors and the phony baloney judges that may exist over here. But anyway, the lawful system in the UK, I want to make sure that I have a will on record here, and the same exact will on record in the United States, because, you know, at some point it's entirely possible I might wear out my welcome, and I want to make sure that Denise doesn't pay the price for my open manner of speaking. Okay, and so far that hasn't happened. Speaking of beautiful, the village that it's not a village, it's a city of 5,500 people, spelled Lalangollen. But when Denise and I were walking around it here 3 or 4 days ago, I said, this is just like Plum City. It reminds me of 1965, because there's nothing bad here. And of course, in both Plum City and Langollen, there probably are some bad elements, but they're certainly not visible, and they're not in your face. And I'm going down, well, I'm going down through the chat room, and I'm seeing that Captain McHale has again asked me if I would let her know if I'm going to Massachusetts, which was a great song by the Bee Gees. And there were 4 Bee Gees, brothers Gibb. There's also a sister Gibb. You don't hear much about her. I think she was the eldest of the 5 children. Then Barry, then the twins, and then Andy, who killed himself with a combination of a narcotic, which I think was cocaine, and alcohol, which I think might have been vodka. Does anybody know? Not that it matters, but what a terrible thing that he ended his life voluntarily just because he got snubbed by Victoria Principal, who, as long as you ask, yes, she did go to my high school in Puerto Rico. The Victoria Principal, Ramey Air Force Base schools and she was in probably 5th, 6th, and 7th, or 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at Ramey while she was growing up, a couple of years younger than me, I believe. Okay, now I'm scrolling down to see if the big red button is going to appear. It has. And underneath the big red button, Billy Joyce of Canada said, "You're most welcome." And it goes right back to you. Let me see if Billy's here. I don't want to speak to... yeah, there he is. Okay, it's nice to have a broadcaster from Canada listening in, because, you know, I'm in the UK, but I'm a US guy. David's in Canada, but he's a UK guy. But somewhere between Canada, the UK, and the US, I think these three countries, whether they want to be remembered this way or not, are going to be remembered for having foisted much of the evil upon our global equals over the last, well, let's just think about that. Go back to 1914. I think that's when World War I started. Never had to start. And it was supposed to end all wars, wasn't it? Sure it did. That we had World War II, we had Korea, we had Vietnam, we had a bunch of Bush desert wars. Yeah, as long as the arms manufacturers have chumps like McCain, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan. Now, of course, McCain and Paul Ryan are on their way out, and Mitch, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, so I'll stop right there. Is Denise coming home soon? I thought, and Denise can and will and could and has spoken for herself, but I thought when I came over this time that we would probably have the visa in our hand during my stay, and I thought that I'd come over and stay perhaps a month. I got here on the 8th of May, so I thought by the 8th of June we would have the visa. And I was fairly accurate, but still fairly accurate is incorrect. And incorrect is incorrect. And no amount of trying to say we can meet in the middle turns incorrect into correct. I was wrong. After I got here, a couple days after I arrived at Denise's dwelling, we got something from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection people that indicated that they needed 1 or 2 more items, and those items are being, in fact, Denise went and got one of them today, and we will be presenting all of them soon. And it depends, some of them may need to be mailed somewhere, I'm not certain. Denise and I will be fine-tuning that tomorrow morning, I think. But also she does have an appointment at the U.S. Embassy, and I would love to know from anybody who's ever had an appointment at a U.S. Embassy if there's no reasons not to issue a visa if they ever happen to issue it during that visit. That was my hope. Denise has reason to think that they may send it via a courier, so if I had to bet, if I'm right or she's right, I bet she's right because she's more organized than I am, but you know, I have my function to play too, and I mean in terms of Abel Danger, nothing else. So we'll see where it is, but the bottom line, the black and white, the 100% correct thing that I can say is she is being interviewed at the U.S. Embassy on the 18th of June, and I am very, very confident, and I'm 110% confident that I want to be here a few days ahead, and that's something that Denise and I will discuss, and that's an issue that she'll have the hammer on. She'll tell me when she'd like me to show up, and I will show up, and it's my great hope that she and I get to return to the U.S. together sometime shortly after the 18th of June. If Hugh is still here, he's my witness. Let me see if Hugh is still here. Yes, he is. Hugh is a witness to my comment. I made it twice, and he may have been present both times. He may have been present only one time. But when Denise and I were up at the Grouse Inn in Carrog, C-A-R-R-O-G, we had taken the steam train from Llangolan up to Corwin, and then we got off on the return voyage at the first stop, which is C-A-R-R-O-G, and we met a couple, and I almost gave you their real names, and I'm not going to do that. I will tell you that their dog is named Barney, B-A-R-N-E-Y, and the lady in the couple looks exactly like Judith Dunham, who sang with the Seekers, and well, she was the singer in the Seekers. The other three guys, two played guitar and one played the upright bass, and his name, and if you're a lisper, this is going to be tough, but his name is A-T-H-O-L, Athol Guy, G-U-Y, and I'm smiling because I'm just thinking of all the ways that we could use that name someday. But the bottom line is, I know that a lot of people out there are hoping, and some are praying, that Denise and I get reunited. As I mentioned to both Hugh and his wife, Agent Troy, and the couple that owns Barney, I've had about enough of this unlawful separation, where it wouldn't bother me to live here in England and for us to have a rental getaway up there in Langolan. I'm 68, and I hope to be 69 in October, but it is the absolute most beautiful and peaceful place I've ever been, and I want to go up there regularly during the rest of my life as long as I'm healthy enough to travel. Having said that, during the radio show an hour and a half ago, I mentioned that it might be fun to get, and I quoted a number, I think I said 40 to 48 people, and I'm using that number because of how many people can fit in one of these British coaches. It would be very easy to arrange for 48 or so people to fly in from North America into Manchester and have a coach pick everybody up and bring them to the village in North Wales. And of course, people from the UK could either come by rail, come by air, come by whatever that means. Someone's singing, Lord, come by someone's hurting, Lord, come by Anyway, this is a pipe dream of mine, and it may never happen, but when I have something good, I like to share it with people so that, they can have what I have. For instance, salvation. But the 6 days that Denise and I just spent with Hugh and his wife and the staff at the Gallery restaurant and the staff at the Cornerstones B&B, it's certainly the most restful 6 days I've had in 12 years, without a moment's hesitation. I can say that. And if that's good therapy for me, it might be good therapy for others. And so over the next year or two, some people may decide they'd like to come over here, and perhaps if sufficient people indicate an interest, if we would have to have quite a long notice to set up lodging for a group of 48 to 96 people. But since most of us, and let me just go through here, and I promise to be quiet pretty soon. But I'm going to start at the top, and I'll say a few people: Agent Lisa, J.R., Vera, L.W. I meant to talk to you, L.W., earlier about a Full Metal Jacket, but that was a long time ago. Bent Wrench, Billy Joyce of Canada, Bob Hutchings of Kimberly, Braveheart of Oregon, Dave D., unknown, Denise is down the hall, Duke McTurks in New York, Eager Beaver. I think Eager Beaver's in Western Canada, and I'm pretty sure I'm right. Then there's myself, and then Gail. And Gail, I'm sorry, I don't know where you're from. Gobsmack, please call me later. Hanging Chad, nice to see you. Hugh, of course, is in the village, or the city of 5,500 people. That if Denise does not get a visa, then I will sell my property in Wisconsin, and she and I will split our time between her home here in Surrey, UK, and that wonderful village that Hugh and his family live in. Jackie Stamps in London, I believe. Jameskins, Colorado, the Denver area. Jeffrey is in, I actually know the name of the town he's in, but anyway, he's in Montana. Joe 90, unknown. Karen S., I don't know where you live, and it really doesn't matter, but I did see that you put something in the chat room, whatever it was, so thank you for that. Captain McHale, I know you're wondering. Katie, I don't know where, and by the way, Captain McHale, I know what you're wondering about. It's my appearance in Massachusetts, perhaps, and it's a question that I'll have answered hopefully in an hour. Katie, unknown. I have a daughter, Katie, though. Kealani Carroll, Hawaii. Liverish, oh, and then Kimberly Faye Thompson, and Live P, and Live P, I'll never cease to thank you for the wonderful photos you took at AV8 last year. Mensa Max in Phoenix, Merbailey, Molly Cool, noted NTTM. NTTM is in the panhandle of Florida. Nice to see Autopilot, who is our European hammer, and he usually hangs around Trondheim, Norway, unless there's something cooking, in which case he might go down to Stavanger. Oversight in Canada, Patty Windsor, I'm ignorant of where you're at. Rod, I'm not only ignorant of where you're at, I'm ignorant of who you are, but that's okay. You don't know who I am either, perhaps. But I'm Field, F-I-E-L-D-M-C-C at yahoo.com. Spitfire, unknown. Straight Shot, unknown. Thunder, unknown. Vanishing Point, Eastbourne, which is right next to Seaford, down there on the English Riviera to the east of Brighton. And Vanishing Point and Afterburner and Denise and I had a very nice lunch Friday 10 days ago at the Goff Manor House. So now, with a little bit of crepitation, I'm going to scroll down and see if there's a instruction for me to push the button. There's another picture from GoBanks. That may be in Scotland. It may also be in Wales, or it could be English. Okay, Vanishing Point says ATHOLFUGARD. I don't know what that means, but hopefully I'm... Oh, there's a picture. Thank you, Braveheart. That's Barney the dog. And those feet in blue slippers, or blue sneakers, that's the lady who looks just like the singer. Okay, and Kimberly F., thank you for your kind thoughts, that you love to see me smile, and you're praying for Denise on the 18th of June. You know, all it takes, honestly, is one prayer by one believer. And I could show you where it's written, but it is written. And, you know, if we get 2 prayers or 5, that's okay. God doesn't get tired of hearing kind thoughts expressed by his children. So beautiful, GoBanks. Yes, it is. And GoBanks, when you call, you can let Denise and I know where that is. Let's see. Liverish, I have studied Hawaiian for years, so I can read the original newspapers and books. It's the most unique and lascivious. I don't know what that means. 12 of us. Don't know what that means. Yeah, and GoBank says he's blessed by the Creator to a large degree, and it took him years to realize it. That little bridge right there that I'm looking at from Braveheart's posting was built in, I think, 1661. It's a long time ago. Peace all Moscow. Wonder what that means. That's from Hugh. There's Wales and Braveheart. Yeah, that looks like somewhere where I've recently been. Braveheart put up the picture of the ladies' house. Somebody picked up on the kumbaya. Everybody's leaving the chat room, so let's see if there's a picture of myself and Oil Can McCool, picture of the gallery, a picture of the reception room at the Cornerstones, and there's the big red button. There's another big red